I recently came across some data showing phone depreciation after the first 2 years of ownership. And yes, iPhones do depreciate less than other brands, but they're still losing 64% of their value after 2 years. And this got me thinking, what's the best iPhone that you can pick up used that's still going to give you a flagship-like experience in 2024, but for the same price as a mid-range phone? And the iPhone that I landed on was the iPhone 13 Pro. I picked up my iPhone 13 Pro for £400 on eBay in like new condition with half a terabyte of storage, and you can definitely pick it up for nearer £300 if you purchase it with 128 gigs of storage. In this video, I'm going to give you a full overview of how the 13 Pro holds up in 2024 and why it ticks all the flagship boxes for me. I'll also talk about some of the potential downsides of buying a 13 Pro in 2024, so you can decide whether or not it's worth picking up for yourself. So let's start off with the design and the hardware of the 13 Pro. And it looks like an iPhone for sure. It's very similar in design to the iPhone 15 Pro with only a few minor tweaks between the two phones. One of the biggest downsides of the 13 Pro is going to be that it still uses the Lightning port, whereas new iPhones and iPhones going forwards are going to be using USB-C. USB-C is much better, and I really like the idea of being able to standardize all my cables, so when I go away, I can use the same cable to charge my laptop or my phone, for example. But the more I thought about it, the less Lightning became an issue for me. So I've still got a few Apple accessories, whether it be my keyboard or my headphones, that still use Lightning. So I'm going to be keeping the cable around for a few more years anyway, and therefore I thought it's probably not going to be the biggest deal if I go for the 13 Pro with Lightning, as opposed to waiting a little bit longer and spending more money on a 15 with USB-C. One of the biggest advantages of the 13 Pro is the display. It is an awesome 120Hz refresh rate display. It feels very flagship-like. That high refresh rate makes the phone feel so much snappier and quicker, and it's one of those things that, unless you've tried it, you don't necessarily know what you're missing out on. As soon as you've used it a little bit and you go back to a standard refresh rate display, you are going to notice the difference. And for me, this display is one of the big reasons that I was drawn to the 13 Pro. One of the differences between the 13 Pro and the 15 Pro is that the 15 Pro does get brighter, but it's very sunny here in the UK at the moment, and I'm able to read the display of the 13 Pro absolutely fine under direct sunlight with my sunglasses on, so I don't think that display brightness is going to be a big issue. Another thing is that the 13 Pro doesn't support an always-on display, whereas the newer iPhones do. That's something for you to decide whether or not it's important for you, but for myself, an always-on display really doesn't bother me. On the back of the phone, there are 3 cameras, an ultra-wide, a standard, and a zoom lens, and there's also a little black dot, and that's a LiDar sensor, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the cameras later on. Spoiler alert, they're still absolutely awesome in 2024. The back of this phone is made of glass, which enables wireless charging. So let's move on to the performance. The iPhone 13 Pro is powered by the A15 chip and 6GB of RAM. And there's really not too much I can say about the performance other than it's more than fast enough with plenty of headroom for future iOS updates and things like that. So I think that this phone handles the operating system, loading up games and apps really well, and I've not encountered any issues when it comes to performance. One thing that I would say is different between the 13 Pro and the 15 Pro is going to be graphic capabilities. So when Apple released the 15 Pro, they spoke about how it supports ray tracing and AAA games, which aren't going to run on the 13 Pro, but there's only a few of those games on the App Store, and most of the apps and games that you do want to play are going to run absolutely fine on the 13 Pro. When it comes to software support, it's really not something that I'm worried about. Apple has got a great track record of supporting its phones for about 6 years, so this phone should get at least another 3 iterations of iOS at minimum, but I think it's probably going to receive 4 or 5 iterations of iOS just because it's so fast. Although one thing that is worth noting, I recorded this video a little while ago and I'm now re-recording it. At WWDC the other day, Apple released a load of AI features, essentially integrating ChatGPT with Siri. It looks somewhat cool, it's got image generation capabilities and stuff built in, so the AI features are quite cool that Apple is releasing, but they haven't been released on any phones older than the iPhone 15 Pro. So this phone, based on that, is not going to be receiving those cool AI features going forward. It's up to you to decide if that's important. I think Apple is banking on lots of people wanting these AI features, and that will drive quite a considerable upgrade cycle for consumers. But for now, I'm not too fussed about the lack of AI capabilities with the iPhone 13 Pro. ChatGPT runs fine, and if it does come to it where these features are looking so good, then perhaps I will have to upgrade then. But ultimately, I do think that the 13 Pro is going to receive 3 or 4 more years of software support with an additional 2 years or 3 years of security patches. So moving on to the cameras of the 13 Pro, and all 3 of the camera lenses can take 12 megapixel photos and 4K video. And the cameras are absolutely awesome in 2024. So when it comes to taking photos, the iPhone 13 Pro also supports the ability to shoot in RAW. So for people that just want to capture a lot more information and edit their photos in post, the iPhone 13 Pro can do a really good job at this. One comment from me is that the file sizes are much larger than when you shoot a standard photo not in RAW. The photos are very sharp, the colours are great, there's lots of dynamic range, but I actually think that the sharpness is dialed up a teeny bit too much for my taste. It looks like it's shot on an iPhone, and I don't think this is necessarily an issue with the cameras, but I think it was a conscious choice by Apple to make the photos look this sharp. I found that if I shoot in RAW, it does get rid of that over sharpened effect. So sometimes if there's a photo that I really want to get perfect, I will shoot it in RAW just to get rid of that over sharpening effect, even though I have no real intention to edit in post. In general, the photos from this phone look fantastic. It was the best camera on a phone when it came out a few years ago, and it still holds up really well today. And likewise with video, this phone can shoot 4K 60 video. This phone can also shoot 1080p cinematic mode, and it's very similar to portrait mode, but in a video, so it's got that sort of depth of field look. It doesn't look that great, but it's nice to have. And one of the craziest things about the video capabilities on this phone is that you can shoot in ProRes, 4K ProRes. I personally don't use it very often because the file sizes are enormous. A 1 minute video is about 6 gigabytes of storage. So by the time you've shot for 10 minutes, you're quickly using up 60 gigs of storage, and transferring that data using the Lightning port takes a hell of a long time. The important point that I want to make when it comes to the cameras is that they're going to be better than most phones at the £400 price point, and also that the video capabilities is more than good enough for starting up a YouTube channel or getting into vlogging or things like that. It's really great, it's going to hold up well and stand the test of time, and it's a great entry point to becoming a vlogger or capturing your memories. Let's move on to the battery life. And the battery life on the 13 Pro is really decent. So my model has got 88% battery health, and it can easily last me a full day with admittedly a bit of an embarrassingly high amount of screen time. So I can get through a full day of 4 to 4.5 hours of screen time, primarily on Reddit, so I'm not gaming or anything like that, and still have 20 to 30% left at the end of the day. And of course, if you want to swap out the battery, replace it with a new one, the battery performance is going to be even better. And if you're someone who's not necessarily as addicted to their phone as me, you probably wouldn't have to charge it every night. It might last you a day and a half as opposed to charging it up every night. And finally, I want to talk about the price. So this phone I picked up for £400 on eBay. I timed it with one of the eBay bank holiday 25% off offers, but they are run probably once a month. And at this point, so much depreciation has already happened that even if I was to keep this phone forever or never sell it, I would have still lost less money than the person who purchased it new. This phone would have retailed for like £1,000. I think it was more than £1,000 because it's got half a terabyte of storage. And in that 2 years, the person who owned it lost 600 quid. Whereas I can keep this for many, many years to come, and the most I'll lose is £400. And it's probably going to be less than that. If you look after it, this will still be worth £100 to £200 in 3 years when I come to sell it. So it's actually going to be a really cheap phone to own because most of that depreciation has already happened. So I hope you enjoyed this video about the 13 Pro in 2024. For me, I'm really happy with this phone, and I think I'm going to keep it for several years to come, and it still feels like a flagship. The display is absolutely awesome. the battery life holds up really well. The cameras are great. I'm not personally the biggest fan of that over-sharpening look, but I'll just shoot in RAW if I want to get rid of that. The performance is unbelievably quick, and I'm still pretty confident that it's going to get many more years of iOS support. I think that the two biggest downsides of the 13 Pro in 2024 is the Lightning port, that's a big downside, and also the fact that it's not getting those generative AI features that are currently all the rage. Only the newest iPhones will be getting those going forward. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.